There are so many unknowns when you set out to write that first memoir. Not only do you have to figure out the structure and the word choice and how to actually get the thing published, you've also got to relive all of those difficult life experiences. But what about the experiences that shaped you, that you don't even remember? Today we're talking to Gail Harris, the co-author of Finding Zoe, and she is the founder of Golden Ghostwriting, an award-winning women's memoirist, and the author of a self-help book called Your Heart Knows the Answer. That book is excellent. It teaches women how to trust themselves, make choices that are right for them. If you follow Gail on LinkedIn, you already know that she is passionate about working with women who have risen above life's challenges and have a journey to share. She encourages women to write their memoirs to heal, to leverage their businesses, and become experts in their fields. She's written, edited, and evaluated manuscripts for authors who've published memoirs and self-help books, and you are not going to want to miss this deep dive into Finding Zoe. I'm Dr. Amanda Nell Edgar, the managing editor of Page and Podium Press, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today to listen in on this deep dive into finding out what you don't even know to expect in your memoir. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Gail. I'm so excited for this conversation. Just to start out so that everybody's got context on what we're talking about today, I just wondered, can you give us a little rundown on the book that you co-authored, Finding Zoe? Just in a few sentences, if you can just tell us what it's about, that'll give us a good ground for our conversation.
Sure, I'd love to. Finding Zoe is actually about many things. It's about parenting and adoption, growing up deaf in America in the 1970s and 80s, and trusting ourselves and doing what we believe is right, no matter how challenging the situation.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure it has just twists and turns, which is what we're kind of getting into today. So I know
Yes,
it can be so hard to
absolutely.
boil down a memoir into just a couple sentences. So thank you for going along with me on that.
Of course.
Well, so share with us a little bit about how the project and the writing process and all that changed from when you initially started working with the author. How did your expectations and your goals change?
The author, whose name is Brandy Raris, and she's an adoptive mom. And originally she wanted to write a book about why her adopted daughter, Zoe's birth mother, chose to place her baby for adoption rather than parent. Brandy didn't want to be in the book at all. But when we started the interviewing process, I saw a much bigger story, which was her memoir. And it was a complex story with three layers to it, actually. There was the parenting and adoption story. Brandy actually had yearned for a daughter her entire life, but had given birth to three boys. So she and her husband, Tim, decided to adopt a baby girl from China, but the universe had other plans. Then the second story behind the story was Brandy's journey to self-acceptance told through the deaf lens. She had been born hearing, but became deaf at 5 years old and struggled to accept herself as a deaf person. And as she did more and more, she actually went on to become Miss Deaf America in 1988 during the time of the Deaf Revolution. So, and then there was the story behind it all, which was really how the universe conspired so that Zoe found the perfect home and Brandy found the daughter she'd been waiting for her entire life. She saw the magnificence in the story and wanted to do it. And I would say the challenge with the writing was to weave together seamlessly all these three aspects of the story.
Yeah, isn't that always the challenge?
Yeah, and this was a complex one, but it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's so interesting. And I know, whenever folks are writing a memoir, a lot of the people that are going to be tuned in, I know, are thinking about whether they want to write a memoir.
Sure.
And that can be such an emotional journey. So how did you navigate that? I mean, it's such a delicate balance, right? Between helping that author recall those memories, but also you want to make sure that they're comfortable and that they're mentally healthy and they have, all of those things that we need to lead a stable life. How did you balance that?
Yeah, it's so true. All those aspects that you said. For us, it was really that initial understanding, the mutual understanding that for Brandy, writing her memoir would give Zoe even a greater gift that she had wanted, which is why she wanted to write the book in the first place. She really got that. There was also this understanding of that, how her story would help the deaf and hearing communities come to understand each other better. And then also telling the story would help the main characters in Zoe's life. It would help them for this story to be told. I'm talking specifically about the birth mother and birth father, Jess and BJ, and then the first adoptive parents, Sandy and Stefan. And Brandy saw the healing value of telling that story, which was a good thing, because when I began the interviewing, in a sense, she was actually discovering what was going to go in her book at the same time that I was. And that could be very disconcerting, but it was that basic understanding that this story needs to be told, yeah, that was a good thing. So, because everybody else had to tell their story as well. And there was that delicate balance. In this sense, it wasn't only Brandy, but those other people were sharing about very painful experiences in their lives. So, you have to listen well, really listen, and listen with compassion. But, they loved Zoe, and they really shared in this spirit, which was part of what made the story so wonderful.
Oh, I agree. There's so much self-discovery that happens from stories. And I love that you brought up that idea of helping others, because I really find, if you set out to write a memoir and you want to help others with that memoir, you can do so much more. You can go through so many more emotional things and difficulty, and you can show so much more vulnerability because you're helping others. It's not about you.
Right. And you also know you're helping yourself in a way, because as you know, there's always more, when we allow the writing process to take us where it needs to go, things can get real.
Yeah, well, I think if they don't, that might be a red flag.
Yes, exactly.
We have talked, and I remember one of the very first conversations you and I ever had was about this book, and it has stuck with me. It's why I really wanted to have you on our little video podcast. I know you made so many just fascinating discoveries. So, as you said, things the author didn't even know about. So What would you say, what were some of the most interesting discoveries that you made?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Actually, the first discovery was the story itself, how Brandy and Zoe came together, how the universe conspired. And the second discovery for me really was what I learned about deaf people and the deaf community was such a revelation to me. I had never known a deaf person before working with Brandy, and it was just such a revelation to me, and I felt that it would be to most hearing people. And so this actually became the backdrop of the story, And then another discovery was the timing of everything, which is how the divine timing, and how I came to see that was this master timeline that I developed based on the main people's lives in relation to Zoe. And so, for example, I discovered from doing this timeline, and it was just this like, oh, I better do this. It was just kind of this intuitive thing. I discovered, for example, that Tim, who is Brandy's husband, he was on board with the China adoption. And at one point, he changed his mind. He had many reasons. And then several months later, he changed his mind back. And I was able to see on this timeline that the day he changed his mind again and told Brandy, okay, I cannot deny you, your daughter, was the same day that the first adoptive family made the painful decision to relinquish Zoe. So if Tim hadn't changed his mind in the first place, and then change it back again right at that time, they would have missed each other. It never would have happened. It's like, I have goosebumps now telling it, but when I discovered it, it was like, oh my gosh. And then one more thing, if I might share, this was the miracle with the foster mother. Zoe was placed in foster care because there was a custody battle going on between the birth mother and the birth father. But the main thing about this is that so Zoe actually became deaf after she was born. The reason why she became deaf, it was a very rare thing, but Jess, the birth mother, had contracted the CMV virus. And the only time this ever affects a baby is it has to be the first pregnancy, the mother's first pregnancy. She has to contract it in the 22nd and 23rd weeks into the pregnancy. And even then, only 10% of babies are affected. So it was rare, but it just so happened that the foster mother, Zoe was placed in her care twice. The foster mother had adopted a boy 25 years earlier that had contracted the CMV virus and was deaf. And therefore, when Zoe was in Lois's home at 6 months old, when she desperately needed that language stimulation, Lois was able to sign to Zoe.
Oh my gosh. Well, so many things were, you said it was the universe conspiring.
The whole thing was one after the other. That's why it was just so unbelievable. The story was so rich.
Yeah. Well, and it clearly too made richer because the two of you decided to go digging for more stuff, because certainly, you could just write the first idea you have. But this was an amazing award-winning book because you were willing to dig so much deeper.
Right. And it was unusual because I needed to dig with people in addition to Brandy, and she had to trust that, it was quite an experience, I have to say.
Well, yeah. And I've had clients that I've talked to folks' family, and I've had them like, okay, I need to go talk to my family and just confirm this or that detail. And sometimes that can be really rewarding. And sometimes it's a little bit more on the challenging side. But so
Yes.
how did you handle reaching out to the individuals? Like, do you have advice for people who are needing to track down these things that you really don't know whether you're going to have a positive or a negative reaction?
It's true. My advice is really stay true to your vision of the story and have compassion and respect for everyone that you're interviewing with their story. In this situation, we were really fortunate because everybody wanted to participate out of their love for Zoe. And so Brandy connected me with everyone. I was a little hesitant that the first adoptive mom, Sandy, might not want to participate. And her husband told me as much. Her husband, Stefan, I had interviewed him first. I interviewed 20 people for this book. It was very unusual. But anyway, he had told me he didn't know if she actually could go through with it because she was still getting over the whole ordeal. But when I actually sat down to talk with her, she wanted to finally share her story because the family had been judged harshly in many ways. She had given up her daughter, relinquished her own daughter. But when we sat down, she said to me, turn off the tape recorder. And I was like, oh, like I just felt so humbled. And she just talked. And I felt so humbled that she trusted me enough to share this with me. And I could see how healing it was for her, how cathartic it was for her.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That recorder, that can really get in the way of that.
I know. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Totally. Well, so that is obviously a totally memorable, I'm sure very surprising thing that happened. What kinds of other things happened that shaped the way you approach the project or the narrative?
It was one after the other. I have to say that there were so many surprises that every time I got finished interviewing with one of the main characters, I just sat there and I literally pinched myself and I said, I cannot believe what this person just told me. I mean, the story just got better and better. I mean, two incidents in particular, and these two were weaved into the epilogue, but one of them was BJ, the birth father, how he discovered that Zoe actually went to a new family because nobody told him. You know, he had sued for custody. And then after some real soul searching, he decided, you know, it is better if she gets placed for adoption. It's better if she has one Christmas instead of two, you know, two families. So he relinquished her and Zoe went to the first adoptive family and that was it. And then when they put her back into foster care, and then several months after that, Brandy and Tim adopted Zoe, he didn't know. So how he found out was this incredible surprise that I learned through his mother, actually, Joanne. She was telling me the story about how a letter came from the adoption agency to BJ, and it was from Brandy. She didn't know that BJ had no idea that that BJ didn't know who she was. So she went on and on, thank you so much, and what a gift, and thanks for the Christmas present, and Zoe this, and blah, blah, blah. Sincerely, Brandy. And then Joanne, the mother, she said, she's reading it, and then Joanne herself says, Brandy? Who's Brandy? And I just, I can still hear her voice when she said that to me. And then she described how the pictures fell to the floor and BJ was looking at all these pictures and they were trying to feel like, wait, what's going on? What do you mean that there's only supposed to be one brother, not three, you know? And then all of a sudden he just says, wait a minute. This isn't the same family. She's got a different family. And he was so angry at first because he was fighting for her. And then he thought she was happy at this first family, and to find out that way. So he was really livid. But then as he was reading, he was saying, oh, actually, maybe this isn't too bad. Oh, actually, this is good. And it was the way that she told the story was incredible. And then the other one beautiful surprise is, as a result of writing this book, BJ and Jess, who were so angry at each other from the whole ordeal, for a couple of years later, because of this book being written, they actually got together and healed things between them. And Jess apologized at that point for treating him so poorly. And this, of course, went into the epilogue as well, but I had like a hand in that, you know what I mean? I helped that in a way. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. Words are so powerful because they give voice to these things you're experiencing. I think in situations like that, until you know how to explain it, which I think you did that for them, but until you know how to explain that thing you went through, it's really, really difficult to ever heal from it because you can't even acknowledge it. You don't even have the words.
Right. And also, I was very cognizant of not wanting to breach any confidentiality, you know, because Jess was telling me all these things and it was going to go in the book anyway, you know, like we knew that, but still it was a delicate thing. But I somehow kind of said, oh, you know, I interviewed BJ, and somehow it happened, you know, I made it happen. And it was a gift to me that I could help in that healing.
Oh, I love it so much. Yes, powerful.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the aspects, you've kind of gotten at this a little bit, but one of the aspects that I find so interesting about this book, and one of the things that I talk to a lot of people that struggle with, is that there is something larger than just the story, right? Because she's Miss Deaf America, right? So you're also wanting to make sure you're really responsible in how you frame the community, not only that individual story. And I know I've worked with a lot of clients who, you know, yes, they want to step forward, you know, as a member of XYZ community, but when we get toward the end, there always is kind of a little, oh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't speak for other people, or I need to be really careful. How did you handle that? Like, how did you balance the individual story with the broader context of the deaf community?
It's a great question. I would say mostly it's absolutely holding that big picture that you're saying and weaving in everybody's perspective. It was interesting because as Brandy told her story, part of her story was that she was concerned about how the deaf community would judge her for telling her story. It was a little different for her because she was hearing before she became deaf. So she had a different perspective and she had to grow into that being deaf. And she had some preconceived notions, but that hesitation that she had to even share her story, we weaved that right into the epilogue. The epilogue came in handy. It was like a lot of things like, where are we going to put this? But it nested really beautifully in the epilogue. So that went in there. And then in an earlier part, she was again hesitant to share. Well, she had some, she felt she was smarter than deaf people in a certain way. She was naive about certain things because she was clinging to being hearing. And so to tell that perspective, it was part of the story, but we had to use that looking back perspective. Like I was naive. I thought that I was smarter than deaf people, or I thought that I was too smart for Gallaudet University, which really is the Harvard of deaf universities. But I see now. So, it's coming from that compassionate perspective from everybody looking back and the healing that takes place. Also, we were fortunate because the preface of the book was written by the president of Gallaudet University. And the foreword itself was written by Marlee Matlin, who is the only deaf actor ever to win an Oscar for Children of a Lesser God. And so they represented the deaf community, the foreword and the preface. Brandy and Tim themselves were leaders in the deaf community. So we had a lot of connections. We were able to make it work. One of the reasons why I thought the book would be so powerful and successful. But again, we have to hold that balance throughout. And it worked out beautifully.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the universe too, right?
You got it.
Yeah, you had a whole village of folks. Well, so talk about, and we've gotten a little of this, but talk about some of the challenges that you faced. I know, we've got people watching who are thinking about a memoir, or even maybe in the throes of writing their own memoir. What kinds of challenges did you see, and what advice would you give for folks that are going through those now?
Sure. This was a unique story, as I said, but this is something I think that would apply for anybody as they write their memoir. So for Brandy, she was actually writing other people's stories as part of her own story of becoming Zoe's mom. And so we had to tell everybody's story from compassion. So it's really important to hold that stance, whoever you're interviewing from the past, however they fit into the story, it's coming from a place of compassion and understanding, and have your experience. You could be angry, but when you're actually in the telling, hopefully it's coming from the place of having come to a new understanding of your experience. And so speaking from that perspective and speaking to anybody with that listening.
Yes, listening. Empathy comes to mind as you're talking. Yeah, 100%. And I think you saw that with the mother, right? Who said, turn off the recorder. She just wanted to commune with you.
Yeah, every character, it was as she spoke. I mean, I wrote it, but she was coming from such a place of like, I remember when she was talking about that Jess had to take Zoe back after she already relinquished her because because Bija had sued for custody. And I remember she was explaining that, how Zoe had to go to the foster care and pick up Zoe and bring her back home to her own house after she flipped out in the hospital. But she told her story from, like, she couldn't believe that this was happening. How do I have to go through this? So all from compassion and understanding. Yeah. There were a couple of unique things to this story, which probably wouldn't fit with everybody. But for example, I had to use a sign language interpreter for dealing with most of Tim and Brandy's interviews. And that had its challenging moments. Also, because I was interviewing so many people, it took a little bit longer to write the book because I had to deal with everybody's schedules. And then we actually had some challenges in the publishing with a literary agent we were dealing with and publishers, but it all worked out. We have to hold to the vision no matter where you are or what you're writing about, and even your marketing goals. Hold to that vision.
You are speaking my language.
I know.
In a couple of weeks, a video will be coming out that's about how to market your book with authenticity, because 100%. You're writing your memoir, right? It's so touching, it's so personal. And then people get to the marketing side. It's like, oh,
right.
All this self-promotion around this story that's so personal to me. But you got to get it out there so it can actually.
Right. Exactly. I have to remember those marketing goals. There usually are marketing goals that go along with it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, so what would you say are the most valuable lessons that you've learned from collaborating on this memoir? What would you pass on to first-time memoirists?
Well, it was actually what you were just saying, in a sense, that do your research, because that will inform the writing and the marketing. That's a big thing. Then another thing, find that your story's gold or what sets it apart from other stories and write to that. And then again, I would say, just allow the writing process to take you where it needs to go. That could be challenging at times, as you know, but you have to trust in the process and hold to that vision for your book and why you're writing it. And your goals, business, personal, the whole deal.
Yeah. Say a little more. The first answer you gave to that question was to do a little bit more research. Talk more about that. What should we be researching if we're looking to start a memoir for the first time?
Sure. Well, for one thing, see what memoirs or stories that are already published out there, so you know how to craft yours so that it fills a particular hole. As you know, see the competitive books out there, see what else has been done, so you can write to what hasn't been done before, and the voice to use, who your audience is.
Mm-hmm.
As you know.
Well, yeah, but I do think it's so easy to forget that. It's everybody you want to tell a good story, but right. I want you to say a little more, because I think what does a good story mean is not always so self-evident. It really does take digging down and seeing what's out there to figure out what's really going to speak to the people you want to speak to.
Yes, and it takes consulting with somebody that has expertise in that area, whether you're having a ghostwriter write the book or if you're writing it yourself. Yeah. Work with somebody who has that expertise. Don't expect yourself to have it. You could, dig in, but understand what the goal is for marketing, so you know what you're looking for.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, you can work with a ghostwriter. You could work with there's book coaches. We do that. And I know a lot of folks that I could refer, reach out. If you're in the DMs, reach out, let me know. I can help you find somebody. Even sometimes folks will get their proposal together, try to get an agent, and then the agent can kind of help you figure out how to shape it so it'll sell the best. But that is so true. Nobody is writing their book just on their own. I hate that myth. Everybody needs help.
Right. And to just be aware enough to know that. Don't expect, first of all, that you could even write. I mean, many books are written by ghostwriters these days, but that you need some help with if your writing isn't your profession, you might need some help with the editing and certainly the marketing, figuring out, does it make sense to use a traditional publisher? Should I go with a hybrid or self-publish? And what do I have to do to promote my book? How could I get a good ROI?
Yes.
It's a business, right? Like anytime somebody writes a book, if they want to sell copies, it's a business. They're starting a business in a sense, especially if they really want to do good things with it, market it and recoup and really have that book help them with their business, for example.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, if you believe your book can help people, but you don't get the word out that it exists, you're not going to help anybody,
That's
So
exactly right.
I also think, I think both of us, we work with a lot of people who really want to help. They're really, really tuned into the world and their community, and they really want to make change. And
Uh-huh.
I understand why that can feel like it's going to clash with this business approach, but it doesn't. Because to change the world, you have got to get the word out. So that's marketing, it doesn't have to feel, I think a lot of folks assume that it has to feel kind of fake and self-promoting. It really doesn't. This book's
Right. Oh, not at all.
this book
Right.
is
That's
sincere and authentic, but you won awards. It had really wide distribution. It wasn't inauthentic at all, and you got the word out.
right. And people shouldn't even be expected to even know that if they're not in publishing, so that's part of our job if we're working with somebody, to help them understand about publishing as well and marketing.
Yep.
I think most people that want to write their book want to market it and publish it because they want to help people.
Yep. Yep. I agree. Well, that's what we're trying to do here, right?
Right.
The resources that folks can use to get started. Well, Gail, thank you so much for this conversation. I know everybody is going to want to go out and buy Finding Zoe. If they want to learn more about you and your business, Golden Ghostwriting, how should they stay in touch with you?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So the website is goldenghostwriting.com, and I could be reached at gail@goldenghostwriting.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope everybody has enjoyed this episode. Please be sure that you like and subscribe. And if you haven't yet, I hope you will give us 2 minutes of your time to take the Memoir Strategy Quiz. I'll link that up in the show notes so that you can head right over there. 7 questions, 2 minutes. You can get all kinds of custom advice for publishing and writing that fits you and the book you're trying to write. So thank you so much, Gail. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you have a great week and happy writing.